And you know, other than that, it's great.
Now I'm maybe like.
Afternoon, welcome to the Roanoke Valley Transportation Planning Organization meeting for April the 16th. Correct, April the 25th.
Oh.
That's the date you sent it out.
Yeah.
April the 25th. This time we'll ask for roll call, including consideration of remote participation.
We don't believe we have anyone, Mitch, but we've already approved Mr. Ember, so we don't have any, your request for remote participation, so, roll call, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Clinton. Here. Ms. White. Mr. Petrikowski.
Here.
Mr. North.
Here.
Mr. Radford. Mr. Wallison.
Here.
Ms. Moon Reynolds. Mayor Turk.
Here.
Mr. Holliday. Mr. Lyles. Mr. Stovall. Mr. Price. Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Mr. Huber. Yeah. Mr. Holliday.
Here.
Just a few moments, okay. Well, we have Mr. King, we have a quorum.
Chair, okay, thank you very much, Chairman. Moving on to item 3 on your agenda. Approval of consent agenda items, which include the approval of the agenda, action on the March 28, 2023 RVTPO minutes on pages 3 through 27 of your agenda package. And item C, approval of 2045 Roanoke Valley Transportation Plan revisions, page 28. All those in favor, if I can have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
A motion to approve.
Do I have a second? Got a second, Mr. Stewart. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Remarks from the chair. On April 17th and 18th, staff and other stakeholders participated in the federal certification review conducted by the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. The purpose of the certification process is to evaluate the transportation planning process, which included a review of the RVTPO's planning documents and processes. The review was divided into 2 topics, including an overview of the TPO and its committees: transit planning, freight planning, development of the long-range plan, public involvement, and financial planning. Staff prepared a brief presentation of each of these to address to the Federal Highway Transportation Administration representative. The federal review team will prepare a report documenting its findings that should be finalized within 90 days of the site review. Initial comments on the review were very positive of TPO staff and processes, and we look forward to the final report. As you know, the General Assembly held its reconvened session on Wednesday, April 17th, to consider the governor's vetoes and recommendations on legislation passed during the 2024 session, including the biennial budget. The governor and the legislature agreed to scrap the conference budget approved by the General Assembly and consider a new budget during a special session to be held May 13th. RVTPO staff will continue to monitor those developments released to the budget on items such as funding for 81 and other transportation related items. Finally, the CTB will hold its annual 6-year improvement program public meeting on May the 7th at 4 p.m. at the Salem Civic Center Community Room. This is an excellent opportunity to voice your support for specific projects to be included in the 6-year improvement program. Representatives of the RVTPO will be in attendance to discuss the TPO's priority projects. And with that said, we'll now move on to item number 5, which is a discussion with Dr. Ray Smoot, member of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Dr. Smoot is Chief Executive Officer Emeritus and Secretary Treasurer of the Virginia Tech Foundation Incorporated, where he was responsible for management of assets and real estate development in excess of $1.3 billion, including the University's endowment, the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center, and the Hotel Roanoke. He previously held several vice presidential posts at Virginia Tech, most recently as Vice President for Administration and Treasurer. Prior to returning to Virginia Tech in 1975, he was a graduate research associate at the Ohio State University and served as a legislative assistant in the Ohio House of Representatives and Senate. Dr. Smoot is a native of Lynchburg, Virginia, and earned bachelor and master's programs from Virginia Tech and his PhD from the Ohio State University. Let's give Dr. Smoot a warm welcome. Thank you, Dr. Smoot.
Bill, thank you very much. And nice to be able to visit with everyone here today. I did this once before, and I think COVID was somewhere in the neighborhood, and attendance has certainly improved since COVID. And I want to share some thoughts about transportation in the Commonwealth. I hope you will find at least some of this of interest. And when I finish, please, we will have a question and answer period to the extent we have time to do that. And that may be the better part of the meeting. I want to start off by thanking Barbara for her present of the King of Little Things, which reminds us that it is the little things that probably are of great importance. And Barbara is famous. You all may not know this, but she is famous in transportation in Virginia. And the chair made reference a little while ago to this public hearing that's coming up. And now y'all bear with me here a minute. We had a hearing back, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and as usual, Barbara was there. And she gets up to the podium like this and she starts taking off her clothes. Now, what no one else in the room other than Barbara knew was that she had on a full biker suit under her clothes. But no one knew that. And even Barbara, to this day, your presentation is remembered after all the others. So thank you. Let me say just a word about what I am involved with in transportation, and that is the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Just a very quick overview. All of transportation in Virginia, other than like air transportation, is under the purview of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. The Commonwealth Transportation Board is chaired by the Secretary of Transportation. The governor appoints the rest, with 2 exceptions, the rest of the members. The 2 exceptions would be the VDOT commissioner and the head of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation by the ex officio office they hold. The rest of us appointed by the governor. Transportation, other than air transportation in Virginia, is divided into 9 districts. We're in the Salem district. Don't ask me how I got named that other than something else. I have no idea. It was hundreds of years ago, I think, but we're in the Salem district. There are 9 other districts. And each district is represented on the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Then there are like 2 at-large rural members and 2 at-large urban members, also appointed by the governor. The Salem district covers essentially everything from just west of Lynchburg to the West Virginia line. It goes down 81 to about Wythe County. It goes down 220 all the way to the North Carolina line, and it goes up 220 all the way through Alleghany County. So it covers a lot of geography. And just as a footnote to that, and Ken, help me out here a minute. I think the Salem district has about 200 miles of unpaved roads in it.
At least.
Yeah.
One of the largest.
And that is, I think, the largest in the Commonwealth. Which some of my UVA friends reminds me that there's even more evidence that all dirt roads lead to tech. You all remember those bumper stickers we had to suffer with back 20 years or so ago. But that's the overall organization of transportation in the Commonwealth. And I want to say this, and this is not out of trying to add to the importance of transportation, but transportation is darn important. I cannot think of any country in the world that has a high standard of living and poor transportation. Can't think of any. Bill made reference to working with the Ohio legislature for a while, and when I did that, the governor was Jim Rhodes, who, unlike in Virginia, I think he was governor like 4 times. And he asked me one time, said, "You want to go on a campaign trail with me tonight?" And I said, "Yeah, I would." So I went out with him. He was speaking to some club out somewhere in Ohio. And he gave the speech, and the speech was about how highways are the arteries of commerce.
Amen.
Well, that has stuck with me. I mean, that is right on. It was true then, and it's true now, and it will probably be true 50 years from now. They're not the only arteries of commerce, but they're probably the primary arteries of commerce. Everything almost we have was transported somehow to us. You know, the days when you made it all at home and everything from what you wore to what you ate, they're long gone. I guess there's still a very few people who do that, but practically everything is transported. We all transported ourselves here today for this meeting. And if we don't do reasonably well with transportation as a state and as a region, we're in real trouble. I think Virginia has done reasonably well. It could do better. And I'm going to talk today about several projects that I know all of us are interested in. King knows a lot, Ken King knows a lot more about these than I do, but I'll get started anyway. I-81, one of our favorite projects. The year I started at Virginia Tech was the year I-81 opened around Roanoke. When I first started, I grew up in Lynchburg. When I first started coming up here, you had to go through Roanoke to get to Blacksburg. Well, I-81 opened, and you could drive, and I'm not exaggerating, you could drive a mile or 2 at times on I-81 and never see another vehicle. Gosh, that's changed. And I-81 is something that touches the life of practically everyone in this region every day. And it had gotten to the point that many of those experiences were not very pleasant ones, not good memories. And the former administration, with bipartisan support, put in place the I-81 improvement program. And we're seeing that as it's acted out around us every day. As I have reminded some of my friends in New River Valley, there is no gain without pain. And we certainly have experienced, again, you all have done a good job of minimizing it, I think, but there's certainly pain whenever you have construction on a road like I-81 and can't close the road to do the construction. Now, what's going to happen? Well, Ken assures me that what's happening out there right now, you know, we're getting toward the end of that phase. And I'm pleased that the state has agreed to do the next phase fairly promptly after that one, which will provide 3 lanes in each direction for Wildwood Road on out to Roanoke. Now, as most of you know, there are already 3 lanes from Roanoke to Christiansburg. That was done 10, 12 years ago. But it will be nice then to have, the continuation of the three laning that's going on right now, and then going, to the north as well, out to, Troutville. I-81 is challenged by truck traffic. I believe it's correct that it has the second highest truck to car ratio of any interstate in the United States. And it may not be too bad out there, 2 o'clock this afternoon, but try it about 9 p.m. sometime when the trucks are really rolling and you're kind of sandwiched in between them. And the work that is going on will help address that, but it will not fully address that because traffic continues to increase. And I don't yet know what the overall plan will be, and there is no overall plan at this time, to provide 3 lanes in each direction all the way from the Tennessee line to the West Virginia line on the north, about, 300 or so miles, maybe more than that, Ken. But it is going to continue to be a challenge, even with the improvements. If the improvements had not been made, it would have been an absolute mess out there. In fact, I suspect we would all be concerned about everyone detouring throughout towns and cities and counties to stay off of I-81. It's now sometimes happens. We get just a glimpse of this when there's been a significant accident. Passenger rail is another thing that I've had a particular interest in. And Virginia is really a leader in the United States in passenger rail. You could not name, I don't think, 5 other states that have developed passenger rail to the extent that it is now present in Virginia. That originated in the last administration. It is the commitment has been continued in the current administration. As we know, there are now 2 trains each way to Roanoke every day. We had one that started about, 10, 11 years ago, and that was added to. The next initiative in our region, of course, is extending passenger rail onto the New River Valley. That is a funded project. It's not like someone has to go find the money. It's difficult to do. So what is holding it back? I remind some of my colleagues in Richmond that the Transcontinental Railroad was built in 4 years in the late 1860s with no automated equipment, just blasting powder and people. So how in the world can it take 10 years to get passenger rail 30 miles to the New River Valley on track that already exists? Frankly, I've got to receive a satisfactory answer to that question. Bill will know a little bit about that since he's worked with Norfolk Southern, but in any event, it is going to happen. There is some question at present as to where the station is going to be at the New River Valley because of the mile-long tunnel up there that it costs a lot of money to upgrade where Amtrak requires it to be upgraded. And the station may end up on the east end of the tunnel, which would avoid having to go through it and eliminate that several $100 million problem. But that's all being worked out right now. Passenger rail, I think, will continue to evolve as an alternative to highway travel. The I-95 corridor between Richmond and DC now has 10 trains each way daily. The plan is to take that to about 16 trains each way daily. And the state has acquired right away all along that corridor, so it will have a dedicated passenger track. It won't have to compete with freight traffic, which is what causes a lot of the delays that we see going on today. The passenger rail will continue to evolve. There is no real east-west passenger rail in Virginia. You can do pretty well with that, getting from Tidewater to Richmond, and that's the end of the line as far as east-west is concerned. So there's some attention being given to bringing it even, across the state through Lynchburg, Roanoke, and then trying to take the service that already exists coming down through Stanton, Clifton Forge, and going west, which now is 3 days a week, to move that to 7 days a week. So that's some of the stuff that's in the pipeline. Local projects, of course, what we're all most interested in, or see the most of, and I mentioned the 81 projects. The 419-220 intersection project is one that is funded, is agreed to, and again, I think it's going to start in several months.
Advertisement next month.
Yeah. So that will address a real bottleneck out there. There are several others which I won't go into, but suffice it to say that there will always be needs for additional highways, bikeways, trails, whatever. The more you build, the more of the money you have available you have to spend on maintenance, which then reduces the amount of money, absent tax increases, it reduces the amount of money available for new projects. That's a continued tension that exists in looking at highway construction. Maintenance costs and construction costs is just gone through the roof. Fortunately, some of them have backed down a bit from where they were a year ago. But we had to approve recently at a transportation board meeting a $100 million change to this year's budget, simply to fund the increased cost of asphalt and diesel fuel and gasoline to run equipment across the Commonwealth. $100 million increase just related to inflation for those items. And we hope that's going to get better, but remains to be seen. Smart scale. Smart scale is a process that was put in place, I guess, 10, 12 years ago by the General Assembly to try to bring a more quantitative decision-making process to the allocation of highway money. Up until that time, it was a highly politicized process. It was all kinds of let's make a deal activity going on, which may or may not have been related to a real need for the project. And the General Assembly, to its credit, I think, tried to put in place a process that would be very metric driven, that would give weight and attention to such things as safety, congestion, access to work, a la economic development. And we will now, we're in the very early stages actually, but round 6, it happens every other year, each biennium. Now, there's a bit of, I think, bad news here. Smart scale round 5, the most recent round, had about $1.7 billion at the state level to fund projects. I learned in Richmond several days ago that number is going to be, at least based on what anybody knows about numbers until the budget gets approved, that number is going to be closer to $1.2 million in round 6. So a $500 million decrease. That's going to decrease the number of projects, obviously. The money is divided, and the 1.2 billion or whatever it turns out to be is divided into two pots. There's a statewide pot, and there is a district pot, each of the 9 districts. That is about a 50-50 split in round numbers. Each district, each municipality, each local government can compete in both pots. In the statewide pot, your project competes with everybody else in the state. In the district pot, your project competes with everybody else in the district. So your chances of being successful at the district level are probably greater than at the state level. The Salem district, again, check me on this, generally receives in round numbers about 10% of the district money. So that means it would probably have $65–70 million state money in the district pot for round 6. Now, again, none of this is known for sure until the legislature gets through, but that's where we are today. That means that it's going to be much more competitive. There will be fewer projects funded. Now, you might ask, well, why was it 1.7 billion last round and 1.2 billion this round? And there's several pieces to that. One piece is that there was just so much federal money out floating around during the last round, largely related to things that the Congress did for COVID. There was almost an embarrassment of money out floating around, not just in Virginia, but in practically all the states, because for one reason we have such a large deficit today. And a lot of that money has gone away as COVID has gone away. So now we're more back to a typical running rate. I want to emphasize, and I think this is a great group to act on this, because this is a regional group. And regionalism is absolutely critical to our success at the state level. To use the old expression, it's hard to circle one wagon. And if we don't act regionally, that's what we're trying to do. And folks, that is not going to work for this part of the state. It might work for Fairfax County. It is not going to work for this part of the state. We just do not have the legislative numbers nor clout that Northern Virginia, Tidewater, and Richmond have. I don't see that changing. I wish I could tell you differently, but I don't. We are very fortunate, by the way, to have several members of the legislature who are effective at working regionally. The one I spend a lot of time with is Terry Austin. Terry is respected on both sides of the aisle. He has a bigger view of what's going on and what needs to go on. And he has been very effective in representing the interests of this region, even parts of this region that aren't in his district. And his leadership, particularly on the I-81 project, has just been a real asset to all of us down this way. But regional cooperation, friends, we've got to do that, or we're just not going to get anything like what we need. And I must say, I get asked the question sometimes when I speak to groups, well, are we getting our fair share? Well, I'm not sure what the fair share exactly is, but I have been very heartened in working on the Commonwealth Transportation Board, where we have liberals and conservatives and Republicans, Democrats, fundamentalists, and agnostics. I mean, it is a real mix of people And I do think it tends to think and act statewide. I could not say that we don't get our fair share. We need to continue to be concerned about that, and obviously having legislators who can exert influence in the budget process in Richmond or something that we just really are going to always need to have. Bill made reference to the hearing coming up on May 7th. This tends to be an annual event. And it gives anyone who wishes to do so the opportunity to stand up before the Secretary of Transportation, the VDOT Commissioner, the local CTB member, and a number of their staff, and speak to the needs of your particular area. Showing up at that and speaking perhaps is more important than it should be, but it is important. And having two people to speak to something is better than twice as good as having one person speak to something. Having 15 people speak to it is not particularly effective, but having two is. And each person is limited to 3 minutes, so each person is given an opportunity to speak who wants to speak. But I hope that you all will show up and lift up at that opportunity the projects that are important across the planning district area and across our region, because if you don't get talked about, if the project does not get lifted up there, when it comes up 4 months later in Richmond, somebody's gonna say, well, nobody showed up and said anything about that. It must not be very important. And that's why it's important to show up. So I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all today. And Mr. Chair, I don't know if you're having time for questions and answers or not, but if you do, I'll see what I can do.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot. I think we've got plenty of time. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Smoot or comments, don't be shy. Barbara.
Dr. Smoot, inland port was originally proposed for Ellison Lafayette. What happened there, and is that getting trucks on train?
Barbara,
What's happening
that's a great question. But just call me Ray. That's the name my mother gave me, so
Okay.
that'll work fine. I don't know what happened really out there, and Steve probably does. But it ain't gonna happen. It's gone. It's over. Now, there is a study going on right now for an inland port, generally in the West County area, on down to Abington, I think. And the outcome of that study, I think, will guide whether we're going to have a second inland port. We already have one up in the Front Royal area, as you all know, which has been very successful. But I don't know exactly what happened to the one in Montgomery County. There was some opposition from the county board at the time. I think the railroad began to have some second thoughts about whether that was the best location for another inland port. You know, Wythe County has the convergence of I-81 and I-77. And that makes that perhaps more attractive, because inland ports have to have highway networks to support them when it goes on the train. And here's just a little postscript. Many of you will probably know this. How many people in the room here know why Interstate 64 goes through Charlottesville and meets up with 81 and Stanton? Anybody know the story about that? This is a great story. This is the way not to build roads, by the way. All right, in the 1950s, Russell Eisenhower initiated the interstate network. There were no interstate highways at that time. it was sold primarily on the basis of national defense. Being able to move people and materials as needed. The original study had Interstate 64 starting where it starts, coming to Richmond as it does, and coming to Lynchburg and to Roanoke, and intersecting with 81 somewhere in the Roanoke Valley, probably out around where 220 intersects today. That was the plan, that was agreed to. And in the bottom of the ninth inning, this is why it's good to have somebody stay awake 24 hours a day watching all of this. In the bottom of the ninth inning, in order to pass, I think it was either the federal budget or one of the primary legislative agenda items, they needed the vote of the member of Congress from the Charlottesville area to vote from his party, vote for this legislation. I mean, this thing was going to pass, by a margin of 5 votes or something, one way or the other, or it was going to lose by 5 votes. So Eisenhower or his administration cut the deal with the congressman from Charlottesville that 64 would be routed from Richmond to Charlottesville to Stanton, and not from Richmond to Lynchburg to Roanoke. That was a bad day at the office by our area. But that's the reason it happened. That's why I'm so glad we got something like Smart Scale that at least puts a little more metrics into those decisions.
Thank you. Yeah.
Lately,
Yes, sir. Well, speaking of dinosaurs and politics, in terms of projects, is there any life in I-73?
no.
Next question.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm not sure there's life in any interstate in the United States, any new interstate in the United States. The approval process has essentially been designed to deny approval to most anything. And, I don't think there'd be a new interstate built. Now, that is why the 220 corridor, folks, is so important to us. And we need to really work in behalf of improving the 220 corridor all the way from the North Carolina line, where the interstate suddenly stops as you come into Virginia, all the way up to where it goes into 64. You look forward. That entire corridor is absolutely critical to the economy in our region. Probably the worst piece of it, at least in my view, is right here in Roanoke County. From where 581 ends until you get down to about the Blue Ridge Parkway. That is not the kind of highway that the particular truckers like to operate on. But that's for another day. But we really must do all we can to improve 220. And I-73, I suspect, will be revoked as a record of decision before the end of this year. Now, that really doesn't matter because the regulatory environment has changed so much that even if everyone wanted to build I-73, which they don't, you'd have to go back to square one and start all over. And it would never get there. By the time the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA, groups like that got through with it, you'd regret you ever brought it up.
Yeah, I was chair at the PPO from 95 to 99, and that's when all those dates when it was finally approved.
And that was a great piece of work,
Been a long time.
but there was no money behind, to build anything, as you know.
Thank you. Another question, Steve?
Yeah. Ray, you alluded to this in the very beginning about the many miles of unimproved roadways that we have out here. About 6 months ago, several counties kind of got together, put their heads together. And we're trying to come up with something to, maybe, suggest that, we could find other sources of revenue for, improving those roads. And of course, the main objective is safety. A lot of the roads that we get paved fall under rural rustic, so they get their drainage taken care of and, a shot of tar and gravel on it, but it's of course much better and lasts much longer than the gravel that's put down. Is there any chance that that will be looked at anytime soon? I know years ago, the counties would receive a much higher amount every year to do that, but now it's been cut back so far that, I mean, we do tenths of a mile at a time and it may take 10 years just to get one little finish.
I'm gonna respond, and I'm gonna pass the ball off to Ken King here, who gives a lot of thought to this too. I think that the way to really get at this need, and it is a need, is legislative. I think you may make progress there quicker than just trying to go around and talk to some people about it. You think about that in Salem district alone, 200 miles of unpaved roads. I live out in the country a bit, which I enjoy. But my wife will sometimes say to me, well, why is there no school today? My golly, it's only cloudy or something, and there's no school today. But if you get out and drive on some of these 200 miles of unpaved roads, I began to understand that a little better. But some of the places we're sending school buses, they're just absolutely impassable with any kind of snow or ice on the ground. And that's why a place like Montgomery County hadn't had much this year. But I think we went like, I don't know, 14 days or something, a year or two ago, we didn't have school.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any blizzards or anything. But when you get out and see the condition of some of these roads, places we're sending school buses or FedEx or whatever, go back to the arteries of commerce, it needs some attention, but I think it's probably gonna have to be legislated there. And what would you share?
I think your assessment is fair. Previously, the secondary 6-year funds left a lot more. They put money at the locality with the decision of kind of how to leverage that money, some of which could be for, unpaved roads or a greater portion of that. You got your tele fees that still come to that source, which are a small amount of money. And then, back when those monies got so small, it was hard to cobble together and keep a project moving forward. As that was kind of moved away and really that's all wrapped up in smart scale. And so when you're looking at a smart scale application and funding, it's very unlikely that those are going to land on an unpaved road. So the resources that were at the board of supervisors discretion previously to make investments, greater investments in that area is not really afforded in today's sharing or splitting of the money, if you will. And a way to affect that, since smart scale is driven by the General Assembly's direction, it would have to be legislative. So,
And let me just add to that, we looked into it, and I did some research. Roanoke County really didn't have a dog in the fight, because we only got 20 miles of roads. No one's screaming to do anything except one of them. I think that's Tinkerview Road's gonna have some minimal work done on it. But Floyd County, I think, had the most. In this.
Bedford was way up there too.
Yeah, and right, and there's been some Bedford talk about it, but what I've learned about the tele fees is there was a multiplier put in place in 2001 for $425 a mile. Well, if you did put that in the inflation calculator, that's about $743 a mile today. And what I further learned was, while you might get that passed in the General Assembly to increase it, maybe in some stair-step fashion, and it would help some, but it's not gonna do much more than maybe double what you're getting today, which is better than what you're getting today. it might impact, as Ken said, the total transportation budget in the state, and the money would have to come out of the district pot. So you might get it on the one hand, but it might reduce the pot on the other to keep the total cost of transportation level. So the only other way is to increase it, and if you do that, you're gonna have to get it from some other revenue stream or some other projects, and so I'm not so sure. The last time I heard about it was Will Davis was supposed to talk to Terry Austin, and that's the last I heard about it. And, of course, you know, Will's not here to speak about it, neither is Terry, but that's bottom line. That's what I said. Well, I'm just gonna take a couple steps back because this is not gonna happen overnight. Yes, Kevin.
You talked about east-west passenger rail. Any movement on connections between Richmond and Roanoke Lynchburg area, that connection?
I am not aware of any movement on it, but I do know that it is under discussion. There are basically two ways to do that. One is to go from Richmond to Petersburg, then come up to Lynchburg. The others go from Richmond to Charlottesville, which is track that is not really up to passenger train standards, and then come down, you know, Charlottesville, Lynchburg, Roanoke, New River Valley. It's going to be expensive. I don't anticipate it happening soon, you know, next several years. But it is on the map down there.
Thank you. Anyone else got any more questions for Dr. Smoot or comments? Yeah, yes.
Hey, good to see you. Steve Sandy, Franklin County. So you alluded to it earlier about money was shifted to the smart scale projects to help with the overrun of cost. And I think that mostly came out of highway safety improvement program. So I was curious if maybe you could expand on that. Is that, you know, that's disturbing to me that, you know, now we've lost a pot of money that was supposed to go to either spot safety improvements or systematic safety improvements, that we've used that to maybe cover some shortfalls. And so I don't know what the long-term maybe vision is
Can't
there.
check me on this. The highway safety improvement program is essentially, for the most part, federal money,
For the most part, yes,
for
sir.
the most part. And it gets doled out in relatively small amounts.
Well, programmatically, the department that gets HSIP funds, and many of the safety programs have specific criteria to be small scale, strategic, but it does allow for larger scale investments that meet the requirements of the federal safety improvement program funds. And indeed, I think, and I can't speak to out of that 100 million exactly where all that came from, but one of the things that did occur, as I understand it, is that when you look at what the department does with, the Commonwealth does with smart scale, you know, it is funding projects that by its very assessment of benefits, safety is a pretty highly touted and identified factor for making a decision to invest in a project. And I think part of that was to go back and essentially get credit for, if you will, the safety improvement that some of those projects provided. So it's not that money, nor could it, you know, nor could the state take safety funds and spend it on something other than safety. It did recognize the fact that smart scale, through its very metrics, identifies safety oriented projects that weren't necessarily pulling from its programmatic basis all the funds that it could from HSIP. So, and in the end, you got to remember that it's not like, you know, you've got the money that you got available to meet the budget demands are set. And so it's a matter of managing that money that's coming from the feds and the money that's coming from state coffers to meet the needs of the program overall. So that's what I understand to be the case, is that some HSIP funds were identified, but that was by taking advantage of the safety improvements that are already derived in the projects that had been funded through Smart Scale. But it did not take away safety funds that we still have available for those targeted and specific spot and segment type safety improvements, although it may have reduced what might have been a much bigger pot for that. It did not take that away. We'll still be making similar investments of what we had through the years in that regard.
I guess there's less money for non-smart scale projects to do safety improvements, I guess was kind of my point.
Yeah, there's so many of those state HSIP programs though that require that they be invested on, for instance, low volume secondary roads. And so that money probably did not get full, right? So I would have to do a little bit of research to see the numbers. But I have tried to reassure folks, it's not like we did away with the safety fund. That safety fund is still there. Now, did it reduce perhaps slightly? That's the world we live in with the inflationary demand that we're just having to try to address. And so I think I could do a little bit more research, but there's the rough framework of what I know.
You have any questions for me? Good. No one else has any questions? Steve Clinton, Montauk County.
Dr. Smoot, can you characterize, the effect that higher mileage vehicles, electric vehicles and so on are having on budgets and the revenues that are available, and is there anything we can do about that?
With regard to electric vehicles, the state has put in place an upfront tax, if you will, that makes up for the fact that they're not paying gasoline taxes.
Right.
On higher mileage vehicles, I'm not aware of anything to that regard. I'm at the risk of saying more than I was asked about. I'm going to tell you that I regard electric vehicles as something whose time has not come. Just in the Wall Street Journal this morning, there's a story of Hertz selling 10,000 electric vehicles because essentially nobody wants to rent them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that its time won't come. Because of the battery situation today, I mean, an electric vehicle is fine if you drive 200 miles a week. If you're going anywhere distant, talk to some people that have been driving, see what they have to say. Now, the time may well come, the battery technology is evolving, but it's not here yet.
And I got one question about I-81, even though you've touched on some good news about it, getting more funding. Is the $42 million that I heard about earmarked by Congressman Klein, is that part of the 70 million for 81, or is it in addition to 81? Or
I
is it?
really don't know. It's hard to follow the money on these things.
I got you.
Ken, is there any knowledge as to whether there will or will not be lights on exit 137? Because it was in the plan at one point.
So there at Wildwood Road,
Yes, sir.
interchange ramp lighting, so lighting on the ramps as we had reviewed with I guess at that time you weren't a part of our board, so I apologize.
That's okay.
But yeah, through the improvements from Wildwood Road out to exit 150 does include interchange lighting as it relates to the exit and entry ramps themselves. So very targeted street light level, like you would normally see with a street light. If you look at what we have at the way scales where we have high mast lighting, it's a great big pole goes up
Right.
at high mast lighting. We may have some targeted high mast lighting right around the 581 interchange just to meet the operational needs there. But this board and our efforts have been very targeted to try to be isolated in the lighting to minimize the impact of adjoining properties and the whole need to keep the dark sky so you can still see the stars in various places, right? So not having too much of a lit up skyline.
Thank you.
More questions? If not, on behalf of the commission, I want to thank you very much for your time and information today. We
Well,
appreciate it.
thank
very
you,
much.
and thanks for the work you all do. I know you all have a wide agenda. Transportation is just one thing that's on it, but it's really good to see these regional ways to go about addressing some of the challenges we all have. So thanks for your work.
And thank you for your comment about the regionalism, because that parallels with what was told us Tuesday at the Regional Chamber Legislative Day. And most all of the legislators, senators, as well as delegates resonated that theme that we get along better among each other for the most part compared to other parts of the state where they're fighting with each other right in their own backyards. And, of course, they're much bigger than we are, but that's the asset we have, and we must always continue to advocate for regionalism, or otherwise we're gonna be left on the side of the road.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have another question? You share it with me.
Besides that, seven. Support him.
Very good. All right, thank you all very much for the good question for Dr. Smoot. Moving on to action item number 6, update on the fiscal year 25 FTA 5310 program applications, page 29 of your agenda. Chair, recognize the five.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As any of you all that might have watched soap operas, the role of Allison's Sinette in your agenda will be played by Brian Hill. Just a very quick update and just an explanation on the 5310 program, which is a Federal Transit Administration program geared toward provision of transportation services for seniors and those with disability. We have, in the application cycle that began on, or that ended, I should say, on February 1st for FY 25, we had one applicant in the region from Roanoke County, which is a continuation of service for the Fortran program, and the Fortran program is, again, a service that provides transportation for elderly and seniors 65 and over in the county of Roanoke to Benton, Roanoke County, city of Salem, and the city of Roanoke. And this is for essentially a turnkey capital project to provide operating assistance. They provide assistance through a third-party provider named VIA. It's for, again, it's a capital project for operating assistance, so think about that a second. In terms of confusion, but the requested amounts of 2 separate pots, 648,422 in the urban program, which again covers the urbanized portion of the TPO, and the rural program, 204,765, which covers some of the rural area as well. So this is this application is we would expect a favorable nod in the 6-year improvement program, and that it would be added and approved in the 6-year improvement program, which would be adopted next month by the CTP. So that's really all I've got on that.
Thank you very much, Brian. And there is no action on that item.
No action, because again, just an FYI, this is a federal apportionment. It covers the area, and since there's no direct allocation authority from the TPO, just as FYI.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, recommendation on the FY 25 Unified Planning Work Program, pages 30 to 55 of your agenda package. And Tori Williams will give us the update on that.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the policy board. Each April, we bring the the fiscal year unified planning work program, which is essentially an outline of the planning work that the TPO will be undertaking in the upcoming fiscal year. You advance the screen, please. So the development of the work program, Jeremy sends a letter to chief administrative officers in January for project ideas and concepts. Those requests are reviewed in February and programmed into the draft work program, which is shared with the TTC and the TPO at their meeting in March. And then we bring this for adoption to the TPO in the April meeting. We have a May 3rd deadline of turning this in, at least on the FTA side. Next slide, please. some of the key elements in addition to the normal administrative planning activities we do. I'll just highlight a couple. There's a transportation and economic development study that is done. I think the first one was done in 2018 and a follow-up in 2021. So we're gonna take a look at updating that. And then Roanoke County has requested a regional truck parking study. This is a national problem. I've been reading some studies from across the country, and hopefully our study will be patterned after the ones I've looked at. And you can see, this is other typical activities we're undertaking. I'll mention one more since Dr. Smoot mentioned electric vehicles. Andre Garland on our staff is working with a consultant to look at an electric vehicle regional charging study, and that should be completed, I think, would you say in the fall?
I think we'll complete in this fiscal year.
I'll be done this year. Okay. I thought it was carrying over.
Well, I think that it's going smoothly.
Okay.
So it was projected to go over, but
Okay.
in my, like.
Gotcha. All right. Next slide. So here are the, this is probably way more detailed than anyone in this room actually needs, but program activity expenditures are aligned across these categories. We did receive a nominal amount of additional FTA money that will be programmed into contingency funds moving forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Tori? There being no questions, then we'll have a motion that we approve the FY 25 Unified Planning Work Program as submitted.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Tori. Moving on to item 8, annual review of the traffic congestion management process. Page 56, Chair recognizes Jonathan Stanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, members of the TPO. So it is that time of year again to provide an update on our congestion management process. I'll go through a little bit of background, a little bit of data, and then a little bit of looking into the future as well. Next slide. So just a little bit of background. This most recent CMP or congestion management process was adopted in 2020. This has been a federally required document since we became a transportation management area in 2010. We have last updated in 2020 and 2014 before that. And one of the requirements is to provide a yearly update to highlight trends and progress on some of our congestion management strategies. So just a quick highlight. These are the broad strategies that you can find in the 2020 plan, including kind of increasing mix and density of land uses development. So linking that transportation land use connection right there. Make alternatives to driving alone possible, convenient, and appealing, and improve the efficiency of road operations. Each one of these broader strategies has some sub strategies that are much more specific, kind of project level ones. Those are the ones we track, along with these kind of progress on these broad concepts. So just a little progress since 2023. There's always activity surrounding transportation demand management and commuter assistance, so there's always updates there. We've regionally completed the Bridge Street connection, which is quite a large project that's outlined as a strategy. Also Franklin Road sidewalks all the way out to Electric Road / US 220. Those have been completed, and Electric Road multimodal accommodations. That's just some of the highlights of what's been updated and completed so far in the last year. We have new congestion data. Every year I download and I analyze new congestion data for the region. So now we have data running from 2015 through 2023, and you'll see some of that in an upcoming slide. And you may remember last September, there was a sort of congestion management process special report where we downloaded and analyzed data and kind of compared the Roanoke region to some other major metro areas in the state of Virginia, and just gave kind of a baseline of how things look here when we're looking at the same kind of apples to apples comparison to other regions. So that information has been incorporated into this update as well. So before I jump into the data, I wanted to give a background about how we measure congestion from the 2020 plan. We use a measurement called planning time index, and our thresholds are 3 during peak hours and 2 during off-peak hours. So what does that mean? In short, if you take a trip and that trip completely without any delay or any traffic whatsoever, say maybe there's no other cars on the road, takes 10 minutes, and you budget about 30 minutes to take that trip, and you get there 95% of the time in 30 minutes or less, that's a planning time index of 3. So it's a 30-minute planned trip over a 10-minute trip of completely free flow. That is our threshold for defining congestion that was developed in 2020 during our last update. So anything over it, we consider a segment congested. Anything under it, we don't consider it congested for the purposes of tracking in the plan. TTC members may find this new since we've updated the so there's another level to that. It is 3 during peak hours and 2.5 during off-peak hours, because when you're not during peak commute times, you don't expect to plan as much time to travel places. And the goal is that less than 3% of our entire roadway network exceeds these thresholds for congestion, either during peak hours or off-peak hours. It's rather complex, and this is not a standard, and it's not the way everyone does it. So when we were looking at other regions in the state, there are other ways to measure this. There's no objectively good or bad way, so to say. Just different regions opt to kind of measure how they see congestion in different ways. And then secondly, we measure we take special consideration analysis on priority corridors and corridors of concern, which you'll see in some upcoming slides. Just to say, I mentioned our network, our roadway network. We look at about 350 miles for the entire network. That's where there's data available. That's where we track. You'll notice in 2015 and 2016, there were a lot fewer miles tracked. This is sort of big data, cell phone data, and I presume that at this time, the application that we used was getting off the ground. They didn't have as much available data, and so there's less. I still include this because it's important to look at things on a longer time scale, but just know that this is probably not as robust of data when you're looking at it as compared to later years. So this is our broad trend chart. Remember that I said 3% of the entire network is not congested. So that's the 3% right here. And we have peak hours in blue and off-peak hours in purple. So you can see that, really the segments that we show, the years that we show a lot of congestion based on our metrics kind of occurred in the 2016, 2017, 2018, and we've had a somewhat downward trend since then. Yeah. Chair North, do you have a question?
No, I'm just acknowledging your chart there.
So moving on, every year I take a look at some priority corridors. I've included that as well in this year. We measure 4 priority corridors, I-81 from exit 140 to 146, the intersection of 220 and 419, Main Street and Wildwood in Salem, and the orange 460 Challenger kind of corridor east of 10th Street. We also include King Street / Gus Nicks in, as a priority corridor, but we do not collect data for that. It was, it's not generally available through our application. So it's included as a priority corridor, but we do not measure it as well. If you're wondering how we chose these priority corridors, these were selected in 2020, when we were doing the 2020 update as the highest planning time index of 10 areas of emphasis, which were selected by public input from the 2014 congestion management process. If that sounds like a lot of holdover from 2014, there's something about, there'll be a bit about that in another slide as well, in the upcoming slide. So just to run through real quick, this is the segment that we measure congestion at for I-81 from exit 140 to 146 up here. This is the segment of 460 Orange Challenger, all the way from 10, all the way out to the Blue Ridge Parkway on the eastern side. This is the segment of 419 and 220, the intersection here. It is just the intersection. And this is a section of Main and Wildwood and Salem. It is Main from Union West all the way to Wildwood and then up Wildwood to I-81. So this is the new chart for 2023. Again, TTC members might notice it's a little bit different. We did go and review the data, and we did notice a small change where the chart was not calling on the table correctly. So you'll notice the trend is a little bit, there's not a really consistent trend, but overall, things kind of really peaked. This is I-81 in 2021 from exit 140 to 146, and as you'll recall, there was construction occurring there. This is Main and Wildwood and Salem in 2022, and I believe that's also probably a result of construction on I-81. Otherwise, a lot of these segments are kind of on a downward trend as reflected on our overall trend as well. And this is during peak hour. This is during off-peak hour. Again, a really strong spike in 2021 for I-81. Again, probably due to construction, but things have gone down during the peak hour, especially. So some of the things that might be questions after seeing some of those charts. Why does something no longer show congestion? This is really applicable to the orange 460 Challenger corridor, where there's absolutely still things going on there. But I did a deeper analysis of that, and you'll see that this is a segment of Orange Avenue right here. We all know this, it gets real tough in the afternoon peak hour, specifically 5 p.m. And you'll notice here that for each year, all the way until 2021, it has exceeded our threshold, and it was considered congestion by our metrics. And in 2022 and 2023, it dipped just below. So it went from a PTI of maybe 3.5 to 2.6, 2.7. But because it crossed the threshold, it's not counted anymore, and it's completely dropped off as being a segment that's congested that in our charts. So this is somewhat common if there are corridors that no longer show up as congested. And really there's still activity, but they can fall just below the threshold, and they're not picked up anymore, and they're not counted by our own metrics. Another one is maybe delay has moved outside of the measured corridor. This is really important for 2023 and 2022, especially on I-81. We all know there's still construction on I-81, and there's absolutely still congestion, but it is closer to the exit 137, and that is outside of the corridor that we have selected to measure.
Can I just make a comment about this slide you just had up there? I drive 460 in the morning, between 7 to 9, after 9, in the evenings. I don't try to try to get home by 3 o'clock, because if I don't, it's gonna take me twice as long. Now, it's improved, I'm gonna be honest about that, but sometimes when there's construction and the light sequence gets out of whack, it ain't pretty, I'll tell you that right now. And you got the city lighting system, you got VDOTs. And sometimes I'll pick the phone, call Brian Levin and say, Brian, I think the lights are out of sequence again. He'll look into it, say he talked to the city people. And then a couple of days or two later, I noticed it seems like it's more fluid. But one of the congestion points, that notwithstanding what I just said, is when it goes from 3 lanes down to 2. And boy, you got some people get in that left lane and they just jump ahead, and then you gotta wait for them to cut in. It slows down a bit. But it can be challenging, even though with the improvements of light sequencing when it's in sync, on both city and the county side, it can be challenging. And it's going to get more challenging because there are apartment complexes being built that are gonna double what they already have constructed next to that facility. And there's several housing developments that are gonna start construction out that way as well too.
Amazon.
And Amazon, and I see that every day when I play, every Wednesday when I try to play golf, that's my golf day, but I see the construction, it's getting there, and it's gonna pick up. So don't think that 460 is error-free. It is not. That's why they call it Challenger Avenue, because it's challenging. But when the light's in sequence, that helps, especially during the peak hour in the morning and people will walk up to me and say, I don't know what y'all do on 460, but I just really appreciate it. I'm like, thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, that's what they did. Those light sequencing, people noticed that right away because they kept moving.
And I would have to disagree with the assessment on Main and Wildwood, Salem, and the court, and you said you didn't do 137, exit 137, but I mean, I drive it every day. I mean, and Renee can probably attest to this. I mean, it's congested almost, I mean, bumper to bumper from that exit all the way down to Thompson Memorial. I mean, so I don't know, I kind of have to disagree with your numbers that you came up with, because I don't see that. I see it as being congested almost every day. Especially if there's an accident on either one. I mean, everybody bails out, so.
Absolutely. Well, I'll get Lee's question first, but I do have a point about that, and I am holding on to that.
Well, I guess my question, which relates to whether it's congested or not, is you've got a multiplier of 3. So when Philly, when you say it takes twice as long, that's not congested. It has to take 3 times as long as it normally would take, whatever that actually means. But assuming there was, like you said, no traffic, you're driving, and just being stopped by lights or whatever. So so is that a standard that we have to adopt? Or is that something that we chose as being the measure for congestion? Because I think what you're hearing is that people consider it congested if it takes twice as long.
Absolutely. And it is not a standard that we have to. This is not coming down from the federal government. This is something that we have chosen at the RVTPO in 2020 when we did our 2020 update. And so I think a lot of this too is, for example, exit 137 is really tough. In 2020, exit 137 might have been okay and fine. A lot of these segments, 5 years ago, things were a lot different. There has been an entire pandemic since then. And these are standards and segments of roads that we selected in 2020 during this plan, and that I provide data updates on every year. So that brings me to this one, where this probably represents a very good time to sort of review these corridors that we look at, this methodology of how we determine congestion that we look at, and really kind of take stock of the whole congestion management process. The last update was in 2020, and the update before that was in 2014. So that's about 5 years, because you start the process in 2019 and it takes about a year to go through it. So this upcoming fiscal year of FY25 represents another 5 years since the last update. And that probably presents us with a really good opportunity, because each year I do hear that, these corridors have changed. The areas where there's really heavy congestion is occurring have either fallen out of the corridor or they have moved along them, or the entire average of the corridor kind of muddles out some of these really pointed issues. So in the upcoming fiscal year, this, again, as I say, represents really good opportunity to assess whether these metrics that we define in 2020 still work for us, because not everybody uses the same thing. Other regions in Virginia, other metropolitan areas use different metrics on how they define congestion based on what works for their region. So it's a good opportunity to assess whether this still works for us. It's a good opportunity to review, update these corridors, decide whether we want to continue tracking some of these, because we were interested in the really long-term data of that, whether we want to add some, remove some, change the extent of some of them as well. And then look at our strategies as well. Each year I check off more strategies as being completed. There's opportunity to change some, update some, add some more that, and really reflect what the trends are currently and what our priorities are going forward. Because again, lots of things can change in 5 years. So we'll likely be reviewing the methodology with the TTC in an upcoming month. We'll work with the TTC on that. We'll give options for different methodologies and describe what the give and takes involved from are. There are lots of options and there are lots of ways to look at congestion, because it manifests in a lot of different ways, and it's not all the same. And we'll also look at identifying additional corridors for study or modifications to existing corridors. If you all have ideas, you should talk to your TTC members about your ideas, and we can bring them to a TTC meeting and we can discuss it and really work on a comprehensive update to the process for the next year. That is all I have.
Any questions for John? Yes, please.
So apart from having the information or the data that you've gathered, what else is this? What is this used for? What does it impact or affect in terms of transportation and our plan?
Apart from being federally required?
Yes, apart from being federally required, what is it used for?
Yeah. This is designed to kind of monitor, so to speak, our roadway network and our network, and the level of congestion on it, and our transportation network is performing, at least as far as roadways go. Broadly, the requirements to have strategies and goals are really meant to influence really long-term priorities and a long-term look at trying to get ahead of some of this construction and some of where a lot of traffic is going to originate and end that as well, and look at strategies which, then kind of influence the Roanoke Valley Transportation Plan, because things in this congestion management process went into the Roanoke Valley Transportation Plan, which then guides our funded, unfunded priority projects.
Anyone else take questions?
It's a quick comment. The Smart Scale has got safety, congestion, various things. So back in 1992, 91, 92, one of the federal bills back then put in place like 6 required management systems: pavement, bridge, safety, congestion. So some of this comes out of really that length of time back, but it's really intended to make sure that you're measuring the performance of the system. And so then your planning processes, your project development and things of that nature are pointed in trying to respond to the actual performance or condition of the system. How you measure congestion, that's a really interesting one. And I do think that'll be interesting to see what the TTC comes back with. The planning time index was really around the idea, if you go to Northern Virginia, everything up there, volume to capacity, DC ratios is the technical, engineers will do a lot of congestion analysis on that. But so many, it's like the whole network, in Northern Virginia doesn't have enough capacity to handle the demand. So then you're basically up there in these more urban metropolitan, and hence, we kind of went that way with the MPO. Metropolitan areas will tend to say, well, I knew that I was going to have a certain amount of trip to get to work, but I need that to be consistent, because I bought my house and I planned for a 40-minute. Can y'all maintain that trip? Even though I know it's congested, I'm buying into this condition. And so that's what a lot of the metropolitan areas began to shift to, because also, having a downtown parking problem is not necessarily a downtown problem, right? It means there's a lot of life and vitality going on downtown. Same thing with an area that's got a lot of traffic, there's a lot of economic activity going on, trying to make all the streets free flowing, may, hurt transit and bicycle and, so a lot of metropolitan areas understood that it's not all about trying to just serve the cars, but we do want to have a system that people can buy a house and have a job and, and we're going to try to hold that relatively consistent in terms of your trip length and experience and that over time. So that's sort of the basis of the planning time index. COVID created a big change in that what I think y'all heard me talk a little bit in the past about how volumes changed. Our profile, we used to have really high peaks in the AM and peak period because that's when everybody would punch a clock, get off work, and leave at the same time. Well, what we've recognized now is that people are much more flexible in their schedule as to when they come to work or not. They telework on certain days. So the day of the week that's the peak has started to change a little bit. And certainly the AM and PM peak hours that used to be a real sharp point are not, they don't go as high on that scale. So then they don't trip this planning time index feature like they did, say, before the pandemic. So I think this whole measure of what we're looking at, and certainly when you think about Roanoke not being as metropolitan, as Northern Virginia, I do think it'll be an interesting thing to look at. But I think we certainly do, in the department, we look at volume and capacity ratios and things of that nature at our traffic signals, when we time those, and we set up timing plans. So we look at a lot of different metrics and indeed will identify the congested points within that day.
But studies such as this, though, they do and they can affect your funding levels.
Sure, they really can.
And so if it's showing that everything's great in Salem, things have gone down compared to 2020, then, people look at that and they say, well, they don't really need this money for this project. When, and that's how I question, how this is done, because that's not reality as far as what I see every day.
Yeah, when you get into smart scale, we do have a couple of other measures when we look at congestion that goes beyond just the planning time index. But anyway, didn't want to drive you too much, but the basis behind it obviously is so that you're keeping a pulse on how your system is performing. And this idea that, you're not necessarily trying to drive every intersection to be free flowing for cars, because you can compromise other things that are important to the metropolitan area. But getting those measures, they do have an effect. So I think it'd be interesting to see how we deal with it.
But it does surprise me that there's not some kind of norm, so, because I don't know how you compare the data in one area to another if they're all using different standards.
By the time you get to smart scale, they are using the same standard. So well, when you're making that, then they cost
They
evaluation.
adjust this data,
They're pulling similar data, but they're pulling from a different source than each individual NPO's information. They're pulling from a statewide database.
So Ken may have answered my question here, but I was gonna ask, is there data on the other corridors that would kind of help decide what I'm not sure 5 is the right number of corridors to look at. But I don't disagree with any of those, they're bad, but there's probably people that live out around Cove Road and Hirschberger that would argue that will be somewhere on that list, or Williamson Road, and having experienced 18 years in Northern Virginia, I feel that pain too. But usually when you free up or you have a corridor that's congested, it's affecting other corridors, mainly neighborhood streets around it. Is there any way to measure that and see where you're really getting some bang for your buck and relief stuff?
Absolutely. We can, the entire network is 350 some odd miles. I think we can look at expanding that. There might be more data available now. As far as local streets go, I'm not sure that local streets are able to be measured through this application specifically, but we are not restricted to these 5 corridors. And there's a lot of options as far as what to measure and where to measure when we look at the entire road network, primarily larger arterial roads as well.
Question, in 2015, when this structure was put in place, was there a consultant support effort that went into that? Or do you know the basis behind the 2015?
It was in-house.
In-house, okay.
And I think the 2021 list as well. If there's time, I can show this application. I've actually brought it up and we can take a look at the entire network and how it performs kind of throughout the day, which is the data that I call to be downloaded and gets visualized for me. And you can see kind of what I look at before kind of making it into some charts and things like that.
Why don't you bring that back at the next meeting?
Sounds good.
Or perhaps to the technical group, because they'll definitely get into that.
Good idea. Take it to them too before it comes back to us. Thank you, Jim. That's good.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 9, other business. The only item I have under that is a reminder on May 7th, 4 o'clock, Salem Civic Center community room for the 6-year improvement plan 2024 meeting. And Dr. Smoot spoke to, so put down your calendar, speak up, or we're hold your peace that day. Item 10, comment period from any RVTPO policy board members and or public.
Sure.
Yes, yeah.
Just similar, Dr. Smoot spoke of the importance of the 220 corridor, and our General Assembly budget bill language came through, called for us to do a study of 220, the existing 220 corridor between the state line and 58, to identify potential improvements of the existing alignment. As you know, we spoke to the I-73, the Martinsville Southern Connector, which was a freeway, limited access facility study that was done. This really looks at, if those efforts are challenged with financial challenges to get together the funding necessary to move those forward. In addition to that, or, until that can be done, what improvements might be able to be made to existing 220 between state line and 58? And we have been underway with that study. It largely involves, there's been a concept that's come through Smart Scale twice, at the intersection of 220 and 87 there in the Ridgeway area. That is a green T intersection improvement. It allows, it allows the traffic that's going southbound, which is on the flats, sort of that T, not to have to stop while the other traffic is kind of coming on and off of that connection point. The northern part of the corridor, where you're familiar with Sheets and actually where the public meeting is, Drury Mason Elementary School, there's an improvement concepts there of alternative intersections to limit the number of movements that are made to make that those signals operate more efficiently, to the similar comment about 460. And then to the southern portion, if you're familiar with the corridor, the northbound direction was put in place years later. The old alignment is the southbound lanes. And if you've driven the two, you'll know northbound's pretty straight. Southbound is very challenged vertically and horizontally. There's a lot more movement in those lines and those lanes in the last 3 miles as you exit the state. And there's some concepts there looked at of straightening those vertical and horizontal curves. That'll be presented at a public meeting on May the 21st between 5 and 7 p.m. at Drury Mason Elementary School. That's the elementary school. If you're coming north and pass by Sheets, it's that elementary school sets off to the right before you get to the 58 220 connection up there. So May 21st, 5 to 7, certainly outside of this TPO boundary, but as Dr. Smoot pointed out, the 220 corridor are very important to the overall region. So I wanted to share, the activities that are going on to identify that study and the potential improvements, and the fact that the public meeting takes place on that day. And it is a 5 to 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
Bill, going back to your comment and what Dr. Clute said about that hearing, and making sure that there's 2 people, but not more than 2 people to speak. Does that suggest we should be more coordinated and technical in our approach to that?
I can't. That's up to each locality. If each locality wants to send one person, or as he said 2, that's fine. The regional commission will have somebody there and to speak on behalf of our interests regionally, and someone from Roanoke County will be there. And so I would say everyone in here from a county or a
Yeah,
city.
I thought he meant out of his group, but yes, he didn't.
No, I think he did.
He meant out of this group.
Yeah, so
I'm just 2 from this group,
I'm just saying,
and no one else from the Salem or no one.
this would be the logical place in which to coordinate that.
Yeah.
Because, I've never heard him say that, but he was very direct about it. He said, if you get 15 people there, it's probably a negative. If you get 2 people there, that's the right number, so.
They just want to get out early.
They usually last 3 hours, so you get 3 minutes, so do the math. I mean, you got X number of speakers in 1 hour, 60 divided by 3, you get 20 speakers, I mean, you might like to get 18 or 19, but sometimes it goes over. I would tell you this, if you're gonna get up there and speak, you ought to give a copy to each one of the people at the table so they can have it to take with them back in case they want to refer back to it later.
Right. I mean, we have a finite number of projects, right? Or am I incorrect in assuming that?
Yes, you can only submit so many projects.
Right. But we know what the projects are that are submitted from this region. And so I'm just suggesting.
Well, you know, subject to VDOT provide the cost information, that sometimes changes what the priority is before they're submitted. This is just to gather the interest that, well, we got some projects, we're waiting on VDOT cost information. Will we have it by May 7th? Maybe not. But
Well,
no,
to me, this is a little like deciding we're gonna create a legislative agenda. This is having an agenda for
each locality has their own smart scale submissions. And the regional commission has some, and the regional TPO has some. So
Okay.
I think you get 4 each this year. So
I made my
4.
point.
That's 8 of these bodies.
I gotta put you.
That answers your question, Lee?
Yes.
Let me ask a hand right now. How many people from the county or city will have someone that talk about their project or project? Okay. They can be. All right, so let's everybody can come there and talk about what their interests are or priorities. And then the commission, someone will present.
I'm always gonna speak about generally, from the TPO or the PUC, we're very general. You know, we don't often get into specific locality projects, but we'll talk about I-1, Craig Hot Trail, some things like that are big regional significance.
Right.
Because in 3 minutes, by the time you say thank you to the CTV and talk about your project, our 3 minutes are up. So we're very, very focused, at least for at the regional, that's large, right?
Okay, thank you very much. And any more comments? Someone else have a comment? Megan has a comment.
We handed out our Safe Streets and Roads for All flyers. Everyone should have one. Advertising our meeting starting on Monday. This is a joint effort between Roanoke County, the town of Benton, and Botetourt County to reduce fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. So please come out, tell us what you think about our top 10 priority intersections and corridors, or the surveys are available online starting today. So please let us know if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Who else has a comment?
Mr. North, if I could, please.
You got 3 minutes.
I normally see Jeremy and Brian at the CTV meetings, and I would appreciate if the regional commission would include the Valley to Valley Greenway as a priority, because it's not being picked up by the localities, and I think it's a regional connection to the New River Valley. I spoke to you last September about the Blue Ridge Parkway and my conversations I've had with Congressman Klein about the safety concerns that I had. And I've sent a few emails to Jeremy and Phil North, and I've realized that there's no way, that even though the Blue Ridge Parkway is considered a community asset, that we can tell the federal government, and particularly the Blue Ridge Parkway, what to do. But I still think that it's important that funding for safety, while they are doing the paving project between 220 and 460, includes safety measures. Now, this is low tech, but from 220 to Mill Mountain turnoff, that you can see the grass pavers, the pavement right here, that are used. And these are really advantageous because they keep it from being dirt, and they also allow protect the runoff. That if you get closer, you can see that they're working on the pavement for the parkway. So this is a real important time to make safety ask along the parkway. But this is what I'm concerned about, is all the gutters, gullies that are along the parkway. They fill it with gravel, and the gravel washes down. There's multiple examples of this, and if we could have this roadway with grass pavers, that would help protect the shoulders of the parkway. And then the MUTCD says that federal highways and rural arterials that are over 20 feet should have markings. And so the Blue Ridge Parkway is over 20 feet, but it's not us to decide what safety measures should be used on the parkway, but to encourage Klein to support safety measures along the parkway to be included with this paving project. And then, any questions about that? Anybody interested in Roanoke Mountain, getting funding for Roanoke Mountain being opened up? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? If not, motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned. See you next time.